Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Friday. Hope we're having a beautiful Friday as we move into another summer weekend in July. It is July 18th, 2025. Great to be with you here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And we have a wonderful show for you as always, because we have a wonderful team that puts it together every single day. We are going to, of course, be visited by our good friend Doug Keck from EWTN and our Inside Word, recently semi-retired as a chief operating officer, but still, of course, working diligently to bring great programming to the network, including Bookmark and Father Spitzer's Universe. And we so appreciate Doug's great contributions, and we especially appreciate him on Fridays talking about what is coming up at the network so you can jot it down and not miss a thing. Okay, Fact Check Friday. I don't even know where to begin with this story about PBS and NPR. Well, they're losing funding from the government. The president will be signing a measure that is going to cut their funding. Taxpayers have been giving them millions upon millions of dollars for many, many years, and they are clutching their pearls and saying they're falsely being accused of bias. There couldn't be a more biased, well, there are actually more biased outlets, but there's so much evidence of just how biased they are. If you remember the story not too long ago, for example, of one of their editors with 25 years under his belt, an award-winning journalist, Uri Berliner, who walked away from NPR because he just couldn't stand it anymore in terms of the bias. And this man is a self-identified liberal, never voted for a conservative candidate, didn't vote for Trump, and he's saying none of that matters. We're supposed to be objective. And so he realized he couldn't do his job anymore, and he tried to work on it from the inside, starting with his bosses, then moving up the chain. And the response was lukewarm at best. So he left. He stepped down. And my wonderful producer, Richard, found the clip, if you remember, earlier this year with Congressman Jim Jordan questioning one of the NPR heads about the issue of bias. And he goes ba-boom, 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 ba-boom through various stories that they got wrong. Talks about how many people in their Washington bureau are openly registered leaning to the left in the way they vote. And Catherine Maher sitting there like, well, yeah, we're fine. We're not biased. Denial is not just another river in Egypt. And we'll discuss in Fact Check Friday. And then we're going to be speaking with Dr. Anthony Oliva, Committee Chair for the Catholic Medical Association, Reclaiming God and Human Dignity in the Practice of Medicine. There's a beautiful conference coming up. We shall tell you all about it. And more on the second hour a little bit later on in the program here on a Friday on EWTN. Weather-wise, strong to severe thunderstorms and heavy rain will impact portions of the Central Plains into the upper Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic through the weekend. A stretch of unusually hot and humid weather is expected across portions of the central part of the country and the southeast as well, beginning this weekend and continuing through next week. And that heat could reach dangerous levels, especially mid to late next week. Of course, moving toward the end of July. Can't even believe it. We appreciate your listenership here on EWTN. We have a lot of news to get to. It's 3 minutes past the hour. So let's see what's happening in and around the world right here on your pro-life radio network, EWTN. Pope Leo XIV renewing the Vatican's call for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas after a strike that hit the only Catholic church in Gaza. At least 3 people killed and others were hurt. A statement from the Vatican saying the Pope is deeply saddened to learn of the loss of life and injury. A statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Holy Family Catholic Church was hit by stray ammunition. Meanwhile, as Devin Watkins with Vatican News tells us, the Pope is calling Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa as a Lateran Patriarch of Jerusalem enters Gaza to visit the Holy Family Catholic Church after that Israeli strike that killed 3 people and hurt several others who were taking refuge there.
Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, made a visit on Friday to the only Catholic parish in Gaza, along with the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus III. As they entered the enclave, Pope Leo XIV made a phone call to Patriarch Pizzaballa to express his closeness, care, prayer, support, and desire to do everything possible to achieve not only a ceasefire but also an end to this tragedy.
Papa Leone ha ripetuto più volte che è ora di finire con
Pope Leo repeatedly stated that it is time to stop this slaughter, the Patriarch told Vatican News, saying the Pope said what happened is unjustifiable and that we must ensure there are no more victims. Patriarch Pizzaballa said he thanked the Pope for his solidarity and the prayers he has already assured us of, while expressing the gratitude of the entire Catholic community of Gaza. A shell fired from an Israeli tank struck the Holy Family Church on Thursday, killing 3 people and wounding 10 others, including Father Gabriel Romanelli, the parish priest.
In other Catholic news, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, according to the Catholic News Agency, asking a federal district court to block the government from enforcing any portion of an abortion accommodation rule against them while they appeal a court order that provided only partial relief from that rule. Under the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission abortion accommodation rule, the USCCB can deny workplace accommodations for employees who obtain purely elective abortions, but they may still have to provide accommodations for abortions related to treating so-called medical conditions. Now, qualifying medical conditions are very broad. According to the EEOC rule, conditions include modest or even minor anxiety, depression, nausea, dehydration, and changes in hormonal levels that result from a pregnancy. Because of this, the conference asking the District Court for the Western District of Louisiana, as Catholic News Agency tells us, to fully block the EEOC's abortion recommendation rule during their appeal. The rule comes from the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, passed under President Joe Biden, which requires employers to offer what they called reasonable workplace accommodations for women with limitations from pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. Search efforts for missing flood victims in central Texas remain ongoing. For the first time since deadly 4th of July flooding devastated the region, there's no flood advisories or rain in the forecast. Officials in Kerr County had to put on hold a search effort after 3 days of heavy rain. The White House is confirming it's looking to reopen Alcatraz as a federal prison. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying this has been an idea of the president's for some time, adding Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Interior Secretary toured the facility and will have more to say about it. If reopened, she said it will be under the purview of the Bureau of Prisons. The Rock, as it's called, has been closed as federal prison since 1963. And President Trump underwent vascular testing after experiencing swelling in his legs. That's according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
In recent weeks, President Trump noted mild swelling in his lower legs. In keeping with routine medical care and out of an abundance of caution, this concern was thoroughly evaluated by the White House medical unit.
All results from the testing, doctors say, were within the normal limits. Leavitt also spoke about photos online showing bruising on Trump's hands and say it's due to frequent hand shaking. Florida Surgeon General wants the feds to study injuries from the COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Joseph Ladupo says the Trump administration is bringing the federal government in line with Florida's viewpoint on vaccines and says they need to support those hurt by the COVID-19 shot.
This is a terrible tragedy that it's still happening, even though we have a change of leadership. It is a terrible tragedy.
Ladupo wants research into vaccine side effects and more compensation for affected patients. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently shook up the Centers for Disease Control's Vaccine Advisory Panel. California Republican State Senator Tony Strickland commends the Trump administration for pulling federal funds from California's high-speed rail project. He's also urging state lawmakers to pull the plug on the project completely.
This will go down in history as the most wasteful and mismanaged project in U.S. history. And we're wasting billions of dollars of taxpayer money, both federal and state. And I think we need to have a serious discussion here in the Capitol.
The White House has terminated around $4 billion in federal funding for the troubled rail project. The governor of California, Governor Gavin Newsom, saying the move is illegal. Strickland predicting the minute Newsom is out of office, the project will be scrapped. The California Rail Authority says it's moving forward, though, with the rail no matter what. Brad Ford tells us a judge in the Brian Kohberger case has lifted the gag order.
The gag order's been in effect for 2 years to prevent potential jurors from becoming biased. Kohberger pleaded guilty, and Judge Stephen Hippler says there's no longer a concern about publicity preventing his right to a fair trial. Kohberger is scheduled to be sentenced next week in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022. I'm Brad Ford.
The man accused of killing an American Idol music supervisor and her husband now facing 2 counts of murder. Yesterday, the L.A. County Deputy District Attorney Hillary Williams announcing charges against Raymond Budarian.
My office, DA Hochman, has filed 3 charges, 2 charges of murder and 1 charge of burglary, first-degree burglary, residential with person present.
He's accused of killing Robin Kay and Tom DeLuca last week, 4 days before their bodies were found. Investigators say he broke into their home in Encino, California, shooting both of them during a struggle. Buderian is due back in court on August 20th. Daniel Martindale tells us a Brentwood resident is behind bars on suspicion of impersonating a firefighter, and he's a former owner of a hotel also in Santa Monica.
Prosecutors say Steve Farzam owned the Shore Hotel, which he allegedly used as the base of operations for several illegal activities. Farzam is accused of impersonating a high-ranking member of the Santa Muerte Fire Department, which does not actually exist. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office says Farzam used the phony role to get government-issued exempt license plates, enter the Palisades Fire Zone in January, and acquire guns only reserved for law enforcement. Farzam is being held without bail. I'm Daniel Martindale.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the agency is evaluating now the size of liquids in carry-on bags now that travelers can leave their shoes on during airport screenings. Travel editor Pete Greenberg says enhanced technology has already worked well in the UK and can differentiate between drinks and chemical explosives.
The technology allowing that, or to be able to allow that, has been in effect for quite some time, and they just haven't employed it.
Because the TSA has not budgeted for the scanning technology or trained employees, he does not anticipate the change until about 2027, he says, at the earliest. The TSA, meanwhile, opening 2 new airport security screening lanes. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was at the Nashville International Airport yesterday to announce the Honor Lane, along with the lane for families traveling with young children. The Honor Lane will be exclusively for military members and their families. Senators Rick Scott and Ashley Moody are reintroducing the Flood Insurance Relief Act to provide tax breaks for those with a non-refundable tax deduction on flood insurance. Insurance Information Institute's Mark Friedlander says anything to incentivize people to get insurance is a good thing.
Flood insurance is the largest insurance gap we see across the country today. Only about 6% of American households have a flood insurance policy.
No word yet on exactly what you could save under this proposal, but the average cost of flood insurance is about $1,000. So if you're in the 22% tax bracket, you could save about $200. And Michael Kastner tells us OpenAI is releasing a new tool called ChatGPT Agent.
The tool is an artificial intelligence that can handle some advanced tasks using its own virtual computer. It can do things like look at a user's calendar and brief them on upcoming meetings. It can plan and purchase ingredients for meals or put together something like a slideshow for a presentation. It debuted Thursday, and it's currently available to ChatGPT Pro, Plus, and Team users. I'm Michael Kastner.
Well, that iconic sled from the 1941 film Citizen Kane has now been sold at auction for, get this, nearly $15 million. Yes, you heard correctly. Several Rosebud sleds were made for the classic Orson Welles film. Great film, by the way. The last known sled was just sold by Heritage Auction in Texas for $14.7 million. That makes it the second most valuable piece of film history ever sold. Following a pair of those ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, it went for over $30 million last December. It is a Friday morning. It's almost 14 minutes past the hour. I hope you're having a blessed Friday. You're listening to the one, the only EWTN. Our very own Doug Keck up next. Stay tuned. Minutes past the hour. Hope you're having a great Friday. We are in the middle of summer. It's July 18th, 2025, but we never ever take a vacation from God. Nope, can't do it. You have to be in relationship with the Lord in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith every single day, and that's why we bring you Catholic Connection and all of our great programs. And make sure you do tune in over the weekend, too, because there's always wonderful programming and movies and different events that we cover all around the world. And especially now that the Pope is headed back to Castel Gandolfo, it's really cool to see the different coverage from different locations outside of Rome. And if you are, I'm getting a lot of emails from people who are heading over to Rome, and I'm encouraging people to hop on the train. There's a cute little train you can take, a little tour you can do from the Vatican. Hop on the train and go ahead and see Castel Gandolfo, or you could just drive there. It's very easy. Even hire an Uber. It's not that far. It's like, I don't know. Technically, it's like 10, 15 miles. I mean, it takes you a little bit longer because of the roads and traffic, but it's so well worth it, especially in the summertime. So just keep that in mind. And also always stay close to us for all of our great programs and our websites, because we cover everything that the Pope is doing and what's happening in the church. And that's why we have Doug Keck with us on Fridays, because then he's going to tell us how we're covering this and what we can expect from all the great programming. Hey, my friend, how's the semi-retirement going?
Yeah, so much so that it screws up my schedule a little bit. I apologize for running a little late there, but
you're here. No worries.
I know, but it was kind of like the last minute. Like, that's right. So I guess in that way, I'm enjoying my semi-retirement, though.
Good.
I got to do Father Spitzer on Wednesday, and then actually because I had filled in for Father Mitch on the live show, right. So that was kind of fun. With the Roman Catholic and his wife, Rob Wall and Lisa, and that was very nice. And hopefully it gives some exposure to some of the children's programming that the team has been doing over years and expanding rapidly, and that some of the people maybe don't watch in the afternoon and watch on Saturdays. Make them aware, especially maybe you've got grandkids or something like that maybe would be interested in this kind of programming.
Mm-hmm. So is summer a downtime or no? Does it depend? I mean, I would think there's still a lot going on, right?
Yeah, I think that, I think like you, as you know, most times, obviously things are sort of down because of Rome, obviously, in that way, because of, the Pope going to Castel Gandolfo and, and as you move into August, the Vatican basically shuts down.
Shuts down, right.
For month, as does most of Europe, actually, in the sense of a work kind of thing. It's the time that better than I take time off. So in that way, those kind of newsy kind of things, of course, our guys are going to be at the Napa conference happening next week, and we'll be recording some material there that can be used on EWTN. So we're covering that and other events that are coming up, many of which I'm not as up on as I normally would be. I apologize, but obviously if you go to EWTN.com, you'll see all the great programming we have available. And the other thing really is to check out our on-demand platform, which is really, really exploded with programming, and our Podcast Central on the audio side. And if you watch YouTube, our YouTube channel, you'll see more and more product out there. Especially a lot of short form. And one of the things really from a digital perspective with the new initiatives of EWTN Digital really is to be able to do something we sort of always wanted to do but never had the ability to focus enough on it, which is really take material and not only create short form material but take excerpts of existing material, which we've been doing, but do more and more of them as with a focused message to them, and present it in a way that somebody would see, I might be interested in this clip, because sometimes it might be, so-and-so's book interview, and you're like, I don't know about that. But if it said something about, a line about, find your way to heaven, or if, is hell really real, people go, oh, what about that? There's a little bit of a better promotional hook that unfortunately is what you have to use to compete in the world. I mean, if you go to YouTube, and every channel is, there's probably a thesaurus of words that typically get used: outrageous, unbelievable, statement, shocking,
incredible.
Right, exactly. Surprising statements from, and then you watch the thing and you go, I must have missed that part. So, but you got to compete in that world, and that's who we're competing against, and we have to make the truth as attractive as we can make it. It'll sell itself, but we got to get people in the door. As Father Mitch used to say, you got to get them into the store.
Right. One of the ways I think we do that so well is to provide, as you said, different formats. And I've been really impressed. Now I've been involved with 2 of the EWTN Learn series. Of course, I was involved in the Women Made New with Christelina Everett, and that beautiful book that was published by us. Right. And I and myself, Johnette, and Joy, several other EWTN female personalities were involved in that beautiful series that they did with the Learn series. And now we've got the Learn series for my book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders. And what's great about those segments, too, is that we keep them short. And you can do them as a Bible study, you can do them as a personal study, or you can just watch them if you just want to learn more about, a particular topic. But even though they're short, I do think it's helpful because, as you said, you get people in the door. A topic, for example, like Italy is universal. Everybody loves Italy. There's not too many people who don't want to at least learn something about it, even just from the food or the wine or the visuals. And, for example, with Kristalina's book, so many women are struggling with past hurts, with previous abuse, and how do I overcome challenges. And so I do think that summarizing those big topics and putting them in attractive, well-produced packages, it's all truth. It's just a way of getting people, as you were saying, Father Mitch mentioned, in the door.
Right. Well, I think that's always been the key of trying to manage and navigate kind of like the world we live in, where people are trying to get hits and people want to get views and people want to get people to sign up, and to always try to say, how can I make this as interesting, entertaining if possible, that I can make it without obfuscating the truth, without playing down the truth of the teachings of the church, in order just to make people feel good about a particular thing. But, there are ways of doing it and presenting things in a lighthearted way. Catholics live in the real world. We have a great sense of humor. I mean, Chesterton was very funny. There's plenty of Catholic scholars who are very funny
Saints
in the way they present.
who are funny.
Exactly. So, it's not that we're not dour. We don't believe the world itself is evil. We believe it's damaged. And so that's how we go forward. And our job is to find the good where we can find it and exploit that as much as possible. And the only reason really we point out the negative is because the negative is attacking the good. And we're trying to protect the good.
Now, one of the major events in the church, and even, for example, in Europe, especially in Italy, is a Feast of the Assumption, August 15th. And I know that was very important to Mother Angelica. So I'm sure, are already in the planning stages for that coverage. It's only a couple weeks away.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazingly, right? And you're talking about the middle of the month of August. So you're talking about 3 or 4 weeks at the most. And yeah, of course, that was when EWTN television actually launched in 1981. It was on the Feast of the Assumption, Mother was particularly attuned to making sure everything she did was tied into the faith, tied into our Lord, tied into Our Lady. So all of those things, like the Feast of the Immaculate Conception was when the company EWTN itself was created, and then so the launch was also on another Marian feast day. So that wasn't, by mistake. It's Our Lady of the Angels Monastery. I mean, there's an absolute connection between Our Lady and Mother Angelica's faith. And you've seen that through the years that she kept the rosary alive and kept Eucharistic adoration alive. And you think about things like that, and I know we talk about it, but, look at Eucharistic adoration now. Look at people praying the rosary much more, becoming much more popular, at least in people talking about it. So many of those things were really kept alive by Mother Angelica over the years when there was a lot of pressure for the church for us to get with it.
Go away from it. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. I always wonder I don't even want to think about it, where the church would be without us, without EWTN, and more specifically Mother Angelica. Doug, you have a blessed weekend. Look forward to catching up with you again next week, and I'm sure we could talk about other things going on, such as Napa and getting closer to the Assumption of Mama Mary. We'll be right back.
Is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House passed the $9 billion recession or rescissions package that would claw back $1 billion in taxpayer dollars from the public broadcasting system and NPR, National Public Radio. The vote was 216 to 213, so it was a close vote. But NPR, PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, no longer getting $1 billion from taxpayers. $1 billion. $1 billion. Now, why is this good for taxpayers? First of all, when they started public broadcasting many years ago, one of the reasons, a big reason they did it is because if you're my age, maybe in your 60s or 50s or older, you may recall that they began this idea of public broadcasting to offer an alternative because there were not that many outlets available. Many of us grew up with just a CBS affiliate, an independent station, an NBC affiliate, an ABC affiliate. Handful of radio stations, and maybe 2 or 3 major newspapers, a conservative newspaper, a liberal newspaper in terms of, the editorial sections. It's much different now. We have tens of thousands of outlets, not to mention podcasts, as Doug was just speaking of in terms of what's available online. And the bigger problem is that when you are identifying yourself as a secular news broadcast operation, you are supposed to be objective and seeking the public interest, need, and necessity, that's right in federal communication law, to give some sort of balance to the issues and to represent the views of the American people, which are not all the same, but unfortunately we don't see that when it comes to the secular media, and especially the last several years with NPR and PBS. Now, it would be different if you identify yourself, let's say, as a Democratic network, or claim that, look, we are going to cover only these issues. This is what we believe. This is what we want to put forth. Okay. You're at least being honest about it. For example, here at EWTN, as Doug just mentioned, we exist to educate, promote, and support the teachings of the Catholic Church. And we make no bones about it. We're your pro-life radio network. I mean, we're very open about it. Okay. So we are going to be talking about everything from a Catholic perspective. It's different when you are identifying as a secular operation and sticking to your guns and saying that you are so balanced and you just don't know, while clutching your pearls, why everyone is so critical. And talk about a lack of self-reflection. You have one of your top editors, an award-winning journalist, a self-identified liberal, who was complaining about bias in the newsrooms at these institutions for years, trying to get a response from his bosses before he went all the way to the top, and was pushed aside, was ignored until he went public. And then all heck broke loose, and they accused him of basically stabbing the company in the back. He didn't know what he was talking about. He wasn't responsible, even though they kept him employed for so many years. So they can still be on the air, but no, you're not going to get our money any longer unless you actually stop with this denial and realize that you have an obligation to cover more than just one side of the story. This came up earlier this year when the discussion began on removing the money, the federal tax dollars, from public broadcasting and NPR. And I think Congressman Jim Jordan did a great job of grilling the head of NPR. And Richard has pulled a short clip of that, so I want to play that for you before we wrap up. Let's go.
Ms. Maher, who is Uri Berliner?
Mr. Berliner is a former senior editor.
That's all?
A former senior business editor for NPR.
How long do you work at NPR?
I believe he was there just over 25 years.
25 years? Award-winning journalist? Did he win any awards?
Our time to
Peabody Award? That's pretty important, isn't it?
That is, absolutely.
So pretty distinguished journalist, right?
Certainly.
And he wrote a long story about what you do at NPR. Is NPR biased?
Congressman, I have never seen any instance of...
Never?
Of political bias determining editorial decisions, no.
Well, Mr. Berliner, in his story last year, wrote, in the D.C. area, editorial positions at NPR, he said he found 87 registered Democrats, 0 Republicans. Is that accurate?
We do not track the numbers or the voter registration, but I find that
Was award-winning journalist who worked 25 years at NPR, Mr. Berliner, was he lying when he wrote that?
I am not presuming such. I just we don't track that information about our journalists.
87 to 0, and you're not biased?
I think that is concerning if those numbers are accurate.
It's concerning. I mean, it wasn't 44-43. It wasn't 60-27. It wasn't 70-17. It wasn't even 80-7. It was 87 Democrats, 0.
Okay, we lost part of that clip, but the bottom line is you heard Jim Jordan talking to the head of NPR about the obvious problems in terms of a lack of balance. And to sit there and say, after everything that he just listed in that congressional hearing that took place a couple of months ago, and to insist time after time after time that they are not biased is really a case of denial, and it's a sham. And you have, as he heard, an editor that had been there for 25 plus years, had won a Peabody, not to mention other journalism awards, early Berliner, and felt so compelled to speak up about the problems, so compelled to leave, to walk away from a very prestigious position without a job lined up because he was so disgusted about the bias within the organization. And he's not conservative. He came clean about where he stood politically. And then when you have all Democrats in your major newsroom and no other, let's say, members of a different party, Republican, even people identifying maybe as independent, and you don't think that you're going to have a bias. I mean, she even admitted that that was problematic, if that was true, as if she didn't know that. Give me a break. Really? It's groupthink. Much of this discussion about bias was first broken as a news story years ago by the former CBS correspondent Bernie Goldberg. He identified himself as a libertarian and tend to lean left, but said the same thing. And he walked away from a very prestigious long-time position at CBS because of the bias. And that was probably his first book, Bias, I think came out over 15 years ago, 20 maybe. It's real. It exists. The studies back it up. There are numerous studies on PBS and NPR. There are numerous studies, and not just from conservative organizations like Newsbusters or the Media Research Center. If you're interested in finding more about this, you can look at my very first book, Noise, which was updated. How Our Media-Saturated Culture Dominates Lives and Dismantles Families, where I got all the different research from different organizations about bias. And not only bias in news, in terms of how they cover stories, but bias in the way they present the reality of the dignity of the human person, on abortion, on birth control, on so-called same-sex marriage, and especially in terms of this issue of transgender ideology that has been shoved in our faces and down our throats, impacting children so negatively especially. It is about time that they were defunded. Come clean, say you're biased, say this is what we're going to do, and go ahead if that's what you want to do. But don't stand there and claim that you're balanced and clutch your pearls because you're losing money from the American people that you're supposed to represent and not just one side. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a beautiful Friday. You are listening to Catholic Connection, an EWTN production. We are your pro-life radio network and TV network and all that. It's great to have our friends from the Catholic Medical Association on with us this morning. Dr. Anthony Oliva, he's the committee chair for the Catholic Medical Association, and they're looking at a beautiful conference coming up in September with the topic being Reclaiming God and Human Dignity in the Practice of Medicine. Doc, there's a concept. Wow. Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your association and also all that you do. So let's talk about the annual education conference, which is coming up in Kansas City, correct?
Correct. From
all right,
September
tell us about
4th to September 6th.
All right, tell us about it.
Well, every year, the CMA, Catholic Medical Association, holds an annual education conference. And each year we have a particular theme. And this is an opportunity for the membership to get together for education, for fellowship, and, they can also get continuing medical education credits. We select a conference chair. I volunteered many years ago to be the conference chair for this year, and then after a lot of prayer, you come up with your theme. Mm-hmm. And the theme for the conference this year is Tradition, Ever Ancient, Ever New.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. Well, let's talk about the importance of this. And I'm looking at the summary on your website, by the way. The goal is to recapture some of the ways medicine had been practiced in earlier times with its focus on the individual and a greater reliance on the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Presentations will examine different models for practicing medicine, educating medical students, and caring for dying patients. Boy, when you look at those three sections that we just mentioned, practicing medicine, educating medical students, and caring for dying patients, those are all huge, and we could talk about those for hours. What do you think are the biggest attacks in terms of medicine and the dignity of the human person that you're seeing in the medical field right now, Doctor?
Well, that tends to change over time. Right now, I think the biggest issue we've seen, or the attack, a lot of it's been attacking our conscience rights as physicians and providers to practice in accord with, Catholic Church teaching. The biggest issue right now probably would be gender ideology.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Another one that seems to be forever an issue. I had lived in New York and practiced there for many years, and every year when I was up there, we'd always be battling the Medical Aid and Dying Act, which is what they're now calling assisted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, that bill has reached the governor's desk. It's never gotten that far before. So that's another issue that we are constantly battling, and they're at the forefront. And just looking ahead to the future, I think the next battle is going to have to do with artificial intelligence and how we navigate that.
Yeah. What about the education of medical students? And because you have so many in the medical field, unfortunately, that think that they have to, prescribe contraception, they have to be open to doing abortions. How did that get to the point where we are today, do you think, with education in the medical field?
Well, education, whether it's all the way K through college, we've kind of lost that moral ground.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it's also infiltrated medical schools where everybody has a certain ideology which they believe is the correct way to teach medicine and practice medicine and what they consider to be proper medicine. And that doesn't often align with what we as Catholics believe. So fortunately, over time, we've really have made some inroads in education. There is the Padre Pio Osteopathic Medical School, which hopefully will be starting to enroll students in the next couple of years up in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Duquesne University also is a new medical school that is going to have a focus on authentic Catholic healthcare. And Benedictine University in Kansas, I believe, is also in the early stages of planning on a medical school. In the Catholic Medical Association, we also support our students through the Novus Medicus Committee, where students can have chapters and guilds, and it supports them throughout their entire medical education journey, from medical school through residency and into practice, because these issues are always going to be present, and we're always there to help them navigate these issues. And if there are areas where they're struggling or getting potentially into conflict or trouble, we can provide them resources and assistance to navigate through it.
Now, this is your 94th conference. What type of numbers are you getting now, Doctor, in terms of attendance?
Well, we're starting to come back. Our last conference before COVID we had in Nashville in 2019. That was a very well-attended conference. And since then, we, like everyone else, were affected by how we responded to COVID with the lockdowns. But we're finally starting to get back to where we were at that point, where attendees might number between 700 to 800 registrants.
Wow, that's great. So who are your speakers this year?
Oh, we have, the way it's now structured, it used to be all plenary sessions, but now in the mornings we have plenary sessions, and in the afternoon breakouts. So we have a whole host of speakers. The attendees can choose from different breakout sessions to which talk they want to go to, and they will have access to these talks afterwards online for up to a year, so they can still get enduring CME for the talks. But this year, the opening day is first before a conference, we do have a Natural Family Planning Forum that's sponsored in part by Duquesne University Center of Fertility Awareness. And that is, Dr. Marguerite Duane is in charge of that. And we also have an end-of-life forum, which is sponsored in part by the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Those both occur Wednesday before the conference. And then Thursday, we kick off with Mass, which is how we should begin everything. And we are honored to have the Most Reverend Sean McKnight, the newly installed Archbishop for Kansas City, Kansas, will be celebrating the opening liturgy. Marguerite Duane will be speaking on restoring the doctor-patient relationship, followed by James Breen, talking about Benedict medicine. And both of those are different ways to approach primary care in a more traditional way, putting the focus back on the doctor-patient relationship and viewing the patient as one created in the image and likeness of God, and not just as another task that has to be done. And completing that first morning, we have Dr. Michelle Cretella, who will talk about healing pediatric
Oh, she's great.
dysphoria.
She's great. I've interviewed her many times. She's fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have her. We are honored in the CMA. We are blessed. We have a lot of talent. We have a very deep bench. And, it's amazing how this all comes together.
Yeah.
The next day, we have The Shroud of Turin by Dr. Richard Scott French. He's going to be looking at the science of the shroud and its connection to Eucharistic miracles.
Wow.
Yep. We have 2 talks on the end of life. First will be by Reverend Dr. Columba Thomas. He's the Dominican. He's going to be speaking about the Ars Moriendi yesterday and today, reviving a Christocentric approach to the art of dying. Dr. Stephen Duran, he's actually been on EWTN a couple times. I watched his bookmark interview the other day, and he's going to talk about the Christian approach to accompanying the dying. He's a neurosurgeon. He's also an ordained deacon in the Diocese of Omaha. And just to show that God's in charge and not me, because I never consider this my conference. It's God's conference. I'm the steward of it. Well before Pope Leo XIV's election, we have a panel. And this year, the Catholic Bar Association is going to be joining us for liturgies, and we're going to have some joint sessions. And one is on our panel. It's going to focus on Catholic social teaching.
Wow.
And who knew that when we were putting this panel together, and that's one who is organizing in charge of the panel is Dr. Frederick Farcarsade. He's a hand surgeon from New Jersey, and he's doing a wonderful job. But who knew that our next pontiff would be Pope Leo XIV? Because a lot of what people consider the initial beginning of Catholic social teaching was from Pope Leo XIII, the Rerum Novarum, the encyclical. Right. So it's amazing how this all just comes together.
Yeah.
In our final day on Saturday, we're going to have a little Sister Dr. Mary Diana Drager is going to talk about our publication, the Linacre Quarterly, and how that can help us in our professional development and continuing medical education needs. We're going to have Dr. Jerry Palazzolo and Dr. George Machescu talk about the
I know those guys.
Padre.
Yep, I've interviewed them many times. Yep, covered them at the March
So
for
they're
Life,
going to be
too.
speaking.
Yep.
And we're going to cap off the morning. The last plenary session is going to be Artificial Intelligence and Healthcare and Ethical Approach, and that's going to be delivered by Dr. Bukoff. He's a PhD from Loyola of Chicago. And, our keynote, we're going to have a combined white and red Mass in the evening. And then our keynote is going to be Sister Dr. Deidre Byrne.
Yeah, I see that. I'm looking at this. She's a dynamo. That is just amazing. Now, here's a question for you. I mean, I know I'm not in the medical field. I'm a journalist, but can other people attend? Because, I can't go, but I would love to go to this. I mean, is it open or is it mainly for people in the medical field and students studying medicine?
Well, it's primarily focused for medical professionals, but anybody can attend. The information's on our website, cathmed.org.
Right.
And sure, a lot of these talks, though, might be geared towards the medical profession, because we do have to ensure that we can qualify for continuing
Right.
medical education credits. But however, there are also a lot of talks that don't get CME credit that are just outstanding topics because, as clinicians, we also have spiritual needs that we need to do this work. So there's a lot of other topics that we cover that, anybody can listen to. And they're not all physicians delivering the talks. So,
well, my point would be that I would think that clergy, even if they're not, for example, if they're going to the hospitals and visiting with patients, which they do, or my husband who's a deacon, and I know these topics, who also is a volunteer in the pro-life community, would be very interesting to people in the pro-life community, pregnancy resources. I'm just thinking that the topics are so powerful and so important for, or parents who are working maybe with a parent-teacher organization in Catholic schools. I mean, to me, these topics are very, I know they're specific in terms of the education requirements, and many of it has to do with the way medicine is applied. I get that, but there's so much here for so many different people in the church who could benefit from this. I'm really glad that this is continuing. The quality of it is excellent. So, Dr. Anthony, if people are interested in finding out more information, where do they go? Do they go to your main website?
Yeah, cathmed.org. And on the opening page, if you scroll down, there's a section of, let me just get to it so I can give everyone proper guidance. But if you scroll down, on the left-hand side, there'll be a tab for Annual Education Conference. Click to learn more, and it gives you information. And people can, you don't have to register for the whole conference.
Right.
There are registrations for, you could just if there's only one session you're interested in, say you deal a lot with death and dying, then you can just register for
Right.
that day.
Well, check it out. We have to go. We're out of time, but I appreciate this, and I'm so proud that you're on your 94th conference. This is super important information.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for EWTN and all that you do.
Thanks, Doc. Dr. Anthony Oliva from the Catholic Medical Association. We'll be right back. Hope we're having a beautiful Friday morning. It's July 18th, 2025 here on EWTN. Next hour on EWTN Radio Extra. You don't want to miss it. We are going to be talking with Dr. Matthew Petrusek from Word on Fire Ministries, how to strengthen Catholic identity in Catholic schools. But first, you definitely don't want to miss our 2 cents. I say our because it's going to be yours truly and Vanessa Denha-Garmo, who is a business coach, a life coach, and she recently dealt with a similar situation that we're seeing in this story that is all over the internet. A CEO and his human resource director, who are not married to each other, the resource director is divorced and the CEO is married, were caught on camera at a concert in an embrace. And now it's all over the internet about this couple, about the poor wife. The bigger issues, of course, obviously, what happens when this type of a situation is going on. And we're not judging their hearts. We're just obviously reporting on what's happening. And the visuals are there, and you can make your own opinion. But it's really important to look at the fallout from this. There's so many levels to this. Vanessa told me she just dealt with this as a business coach at a big company with people who are having relationships that are not appropriate on the job. But the honesty here, the dishonesty here, 2 families now affected, and all of us are affected when things like this happen, and ethics are affected in the business place. So we'll look at this from a truly Catholic perspective with my friend Vanessa Denha-Garmo, not only a great talented radio host, but she's a life coach and a business coach, and also an author. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Friday. It's July 18th, 2025. Great to be with you, helping you get into the weekend and through your week. That's what we do here, all things Catholic, all the time. And we look at the world always through Catholic lenses. That's super important. And we are going to be doing that with our first segment after the news, out of the gate after the break on this Friday morning. There is a story that has been making the rounds on the internet. Let me be very direct and say it's exploded. It's a story of this, and I'm using air quotes here, this couple from apparently some sort of a computer technology firm based in New York City. They were attending a concert of the group Coldplay in Boston, and they were in a suite, and it was a CEO and the human resources director. And they are, well, one is divorced, the resource director is divorced, and the man is married. And they were caught in a very, how do you say, cuddly embrace, obviously being extremely affectionate with one another. And the minute they realized they were on the big jumbo screen, because apparently the song that Coldplay plays, they encourage people to kiss and they catch on camera, and then the lead singer comes up with some sort of a song or a little ditty. And the CEO ducked down and the woman turned around. So obviously they shouldn't have been in that position. Now, why is this important to talk about this? It's gone viral, and she's a human resources director. He's a CEO. So you have ethics in the workplace in the secular side. But more importantly, of course, on the spiritual side and what this does in terms of relationships and marriage and morality. If you remember the other day, we were talking with Father Gerald Murray about how sin is never singular. And not that we judge people. We're not judging their hearts. But we are called, as Catholics, with our morality, with our teachings, to judge actions. That's why we have the Ten Commandments. That's why we have Catholic teaching. And in the real world, in terms of legal, in terms of the world and law, that's why we have laws. Because we're judging the actions of people saying something is wrong or right, such as robbery or assault or drunk driving. That's not judging a person's heart. We're judging action. And as a matter of fact, having covered so many court cases of various crimes, when you get into court, they're trying to find a motive. So then they are judging that person in terms of why they did something, because that determines whether they get convicted. Now, in this case, we're not judging their hearts, but we're talking about the fallout when you see these types of things. It's super important. Now, my friend and colleague, Vanessa Denha-Garmo, guest host here, of course, and her own wonderful radio show, Epiphany. She's also a coach. She is a professional business coach. She's a life coach. Obviously, she's an author, a speaker, and a radio host. But she told me she just dealt with this type of situation at a company as their advisor. And she's going to talk about what this does. And I find it very interesting. It's a very Catholic discussion, because you can't just go around and do these kinds of things and expect nothing to happen. I mean, the world is famous for telling us, oh, do whatever you want with whomever. No, there's a fallout from that. And I think we should discuss it. Again, not judging the heart of these people, but just pointing out what happens. And also, Richard told me, he read an article and he sent me the quote of the CEO now blaming the people who put it all over the internet and blaming the concert, I guess, organizers who do this all the time, as opposed to saying, you know, I was wrong. I was in a situation where I shouldn't be doing this. Anyway, lots to talk about. Vanessa Denha-Garmo joins us at 15 minutes past the hour. And then always great to catch up with Dr. Matthew Petrusek from Word on Fire. And today we're going to talk about how to strengthen Catholic identity in Catholic schools. So it's going to be a great hour. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN Radio Extra. Let's take a look at the weather and see what's happening across the country. Still looking at heavy rain. Strong to severe thunderstorms and heavy rain will impact portions of the Central Plains into the upper Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic through the weekend. A stretch of unusually hot and humid weather is expected across portions of the central U.S. and the southeast beginning this weekend and continuing through the next week. The heat may reach dangerous levels, especially mid to late next week. So keep that in mind if you have the elderly or you're taking care, obviously, of children and pets. You have to make sure it can be very, very deadly, the heat. All right, let's get started with the news. It is 4 minutes past the hour already here on EWTN on a Friday. Pope Leo XIV is renewing the Vatican's call for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas after a strike that hit the only Catholic church in Gaza. At least 3 people killed, others were hurt. A statement from the Vatican saying the Pope is deeply saddened to learn of the loss of life and injury. A statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Holy Family Catholic Church was hit by stray ammunition. Also, as Devin Watkins tells us with Vatican News, a Pope has called the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem as he enters Gaza to visit the Holy Family Catholic Church after the Israeli strike that killed 3 people.
Cardinal Pierbattista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, made a visit on Friday to the only Catholic parish in Gaza, along with the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus III. As they entered the enclave, Pope Leo XIV made a phone call to Patriarch Pizzaballa to express his closeness, care, prayer, support, and desire to do everything possible to achieve not only a ceasefire but also an end to this tragedy.
Papa Leone ha ripetuto più volte che è ora di finire con
Pope Leo repeatedly stated that it is time to stop this slaughter, the Patriarch told Vatican News, saying the Pope said what happened is unjustifiable and that we must ensure there are no more victims. Patriarch Pizzaballa said he thanked the Pope for his solidarity and the prayers he has already assured us of, while expressing the gratitude of the entire Catholic community of Gaza. A shell fired from an Israeli tank struck the Holy Family Church on Thursday, killing 3 people and wounding 10 others, including Father Gabriel Romanelli, the parish priest.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is asking a federal district court to block the government from enforcing any portion of an abortion accommodation rule against them, while they appeal a court order that provided only partial relief from that rule. Catholic News Agency reporting this morning, under the Equality Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, abortion accommodation rule, the U.S. CCB can deny workplace accommodations for employees who obtain purely elective abortions, but they may still have to provide accommodations for abortions related to treating medical conditions. Now, qualifying medical conditions are very broad. According to that rule, conditions include modest or even minor anxiety, depression, nausea, dehydration, and changes in hormonal levels that result from a pregnancy. Because of this, the USCCB asking the District Court for the Western District of Louisiana to fully block the abortion accommodation rule during their appeal. The rules come from the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, passed under President Joe Biden, requiring employers to offer reasonable workplace accommodations for women with limitations from pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. And search efforts for missing flood victims in central Texas remain ongoing. For the first time, though, since deadly 4th of July flooding devastated the region, there are no flood advisories or rain in the forecast. Officials in Kerr County had to put on hold search efforts after 3 days of heavy rain. The White House is confirming it is looking into reopening Alcatraz as a federal prison. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying this has been an idea of the president's for a while. She added Attorney General Pam Bondi and Interior Secretary Doug Mervyn touring the facility, and we'll have more to say about it later. If reopened, she said it will be under the purview of the Bureau of Prisons. The Rock, as it's called, has been closed as a federal prison since the early 1960s. And President Trump undergoing vascular testing after experiencing swelling in his legs. That's according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
In recent weeks, President Trump noted mild swelling in his lower legs. In keeping with routine medical care and out of an abundance of caution, this concern was thoroughly evaluated by the White House medical unit.
All results from the testing were within the normal limits. Leavitt also speaking about pictures online that show bruising on the president's hands and say it's due to frequent hand shaking. Florida Surgeon General wants the feds to study injuries from the COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Joseph Ladupo says the Trump administration is bringing the federal government in line with Florida's viewpoint on vaccines and says they need to support those hurt by the COVID-19 shot.
This is a terrible tragedy that it's still happening, even though we have a change of leadership. It is a terrible tragedy.
Ladupo wants research into vaccine side effects and more compensation for the affected patients. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently shook up the Centers for Disease Control's vaccine advisory panel and also wants to bring more attention to the COVID-19 vaccine issue. California Republican State Senator Tony Strickland commending the Trump administration for pulling federal funds from the California High-Speed Rail project. He's also urging state lawmakers to pull the plug on the project completely.
This will go down in history as the most wasteful and mismanaged project in U.S. history, and we're wasting billions of dollars of taxpayer money, both federal and state, and I think we need to have a serious discussion here in the Capitol.
The White House has terminated around $4 billion in federal funding for the troubled rail project. The governor, Gavin Newsom, says the move is illegal. Strickland predicts the minute Newsom is out of office, the project will be scrapped. The California Rail Authority says it's moving forward with it no matter what. Brad Ford tells us a judge in the Brian Kohberger case has now lifted the gag order.
The gag order's been in effect for 2 years to prevent potential jurors from becoming biased. Koberger pleaded guilty, and Judge Stephen Hippler says there's no longer a concern about publicity preventing his right to a fair trial. Koberger is scheduled to be sentenced next week in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022. I'm Brad Ford.
And the man accused of killing an American Idol music supervisor and her husband now facing 2 counts of murder. Yesterday, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Hillary Williams announcing charges against Raymond Bouderian.
My office, DA Hochman, has filed 3 charges, 2 charges of murder and 1 charge of burglary, first-degree burglary, residential with person present.
He is accused of killing Robin Kay and Tom DeLuca last week, days before their bodies were found. Investigators say he broke into their home in Encino, California, shooting both of them during a struggle. Bouderian due back in court next month. And Daniel Martindale tells us about a Brentwood resident in California who's now behind bars on suspicion of impersonating a firefighter, but he's also the former owner of a local hotel in Santa Monica, California.
Prosecutors say Steve Farzam owned the Shore Hotel, which he allegedly used as the base of operations for several illegal activities. Farzam is accused of impersonating a high-ranking member of the Santa Muerte Fire Department, which does not actually exist. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office says Farzam used the phony role to get government-issued exempt license plates, enter the Palisades Fire Zone in January, and acquire guns only reserved for law enforcement. Farzam is being held without bail. I'm Daniel Martindale.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem saying the agency is evaluating now the size of liquids in carry-on bags now that travelers can leave their shoes on during airport screenings. Travel editor Peter Greenberg says enhanced technology has already worked well in the UK and can differentiate between drinks and chemical explosives.
The technology allowing that, or to be able to allow that, has been in effect for quite some time, and they just haven't employed it.
But because the TSA has not budgeted for the scanning technology or trained employees, he does not anticipate the change until 2027 at the earliest. Meanwhile, the TSA is opening 2 new airport security screening lanes. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was at the Nashville International Airport yesterday, and she announced the Honor Lane, along with the lane for families traveling with young children. The Honor Lane will be exclusively for military members and their families. And Senators Rick Scott and Ashley Moody are reintroducing the Flood Insurance Relief Act to provide tax breaks for those with a non-refundable tax deduction on flood insurance. Insurance Information Institute's Mark Friedlander says anything to incentivize people to get insured is good.
Flood insurance is the largest insurance gap we see across the country today. Only about 6% of American households have a flood insurance policy.
No word yet on exactly what you could save under the proposal. It is a Friday morning, 13 minutes past the hour, 2 cents coming up next. Here at EWTN and all of our Catholic radio outlets, we look at everything through the lens of Scripture and the teachings of the Catholic Church. Everything out there can be related to God because God created everything, right? And so when we see a news story, something that impacts marriage and ethics, we have to say, okay, what does God say about this? What does the Church say about this? And again, as I mentioned, going into the second hour of the program here on EWTN Radio Extra, we're not judging the people. We don't judge hearts. That's God's job. But we are called to judge actions. Otherwise, we would not have church teaching at all. Otherwise, we would not have the 10 Commandments. Otherwise, in the secular world, we would not have the law because we do judge actions every single day of people if they are breaking the law. So when people are going to call and say, no, we're not judging people's hearts. In this case, it's important for us to discuss this because this is a story that has gone crazy. It went viral in a nanosecond. So Vanessa Denha-Garmo is with me. Of course, she is an amazing talk show host in her own right with Epiphany, but also a guest host here regularly for me on Catholic Connection. She's one of my best friends. I've known her for years. Full disclosure, V.
Full disclosure. Yeah, exactly.
Or as Rosie would say, disclosure. But let me read the facts in this story.
Yeah.
So people know what's going on. Okay, this happened the other day. Tech tycoon exposed for apparently having an affair with a coworker on a kiss cam at a Coldplay concert in Boston, raving about the staffer when she was hired just months before they were caught snuggling at this event. Andy Byron is CEO of the AI-centric New York firm Astronomer and called his human resources officer, Kristen Cabot, with whom he was broadcast locked in an embrace Wednesday, a proven leader when she joined the company last November. She's exceptional in her leadership, and she has deep expertise in talent management, employee engagement, and scaling people strategies will be critical as we continue with our rapid trajectory. So what we found out since then is that she is divorced and she has a child, I think at least one, and he is married. And so what happens is they're at this cold play concert, and apparently the group, they do this kiss cam thing where this particular song, they go around the audience and they catch people on video and everybody claps and cheers, and the lead singer, sings something to them. And when they were caught on camera, it was obvious that they knew that what they were doing was wrong, because she puts her hands over her head. He literally dives down, and they're obviously in a suite, and they're hiding from the camera. But when you and I were talking in preparation for this segment, just from an ethical perspective, a Catholic perspective, what the heck were they doing publicly? This is a very public thing. As a CEO, you're in a suite at a concert.
Yeah. And you're with in a suite at a concert with your HR director from your company, who you are having outward, affection towards, right? You're hugging her, cuddling her, whatever, in front of people. And so whether you ended up on the big, what is it called? The big camera, it doesn't matter. You were there publicly. So you're on this big camera so everybody can see you, they're catching you, but why are you there anyway publicly with somebody you're having an affair with? So there's so much fallout here, T. There's a leadership issue, integrity issue, the family issue. I mean, leadership without virtue is really a hollow compass. You know what I mean? What example are you setting to romantically embrace somebody in a public concert, whether you caught on camera or not? You're in a public place, and it's not just about optics. It's really about ethics.
Right.
I know you're two consenting adults, but you're supposed to be high stewards of organizational culture and trust. And so their roles demand moral clarity, not just strategic savvy. You know what I mean? You're supposed to be setting an example as the CEO, a tone of integrity, accountability, and respect. And then she's the HR chief.
She's the HR chief.
And she's supposed to be safeguarding employees, integrity, equity, ethical conduct. And to be entangled in a relationship with the CEO violates that trust and creates a chilling effect on transparency and fairness,
Yeah.
I mean, what are people thinking? I mean, usually when two people start having a relationship with an organization, I've come across this in coaching a lot, they have to disclose it to HR that they are starting to date each other and they work, especially if one of the person reports to the other person, which is in this case. I mean, she is reporting to the CEO and she's running the HR department. What message are you sending to the entire organization when you are having an inappropriate relationship with the CEO? I mean, he's married, you're divorced, you have a child, he has kids, and now it's in public.
You said you dealt with a similar situation with one of your coaching clients, correct?
Well,
a relationship.
Relationship.
Yeah.
So usually, this came up in a coaching situation where the manager I was coaching started to date somebody who reported to him, and he said, I have to disclose it to HR because I think they're going to move her to another department. But that was company policy, that if you start dating somebody, especially somebody who reports to you, right, you have to report that because there is a conflict of interest. And now is he going to be, special favoritism for her? Is she not going to be, are her mistakes not going to be pointed out? Is he going to take her side over somebody else's side? I mean, these are issues that come up in the workplace, in the culture, right? And it comes, and it's a communications issue. It's a leadership issue. It's a cultural issue. And so I know that companies do have policies in place that if people start dating, not married, but now this is something even more than that. This is an actual affair.
Right.
And you're right. We're not judging people and judging hearts, but this is something that should be discussed because there are so many things involved in this from a professional standpoint, from a Catholic perspective, from a moral perspective. I mean, and for people just to engage in it like it's water cooler kibitzing, water cooler gossip, it's so much more than that. And so it's got to be talked about from that issue. I mean, look, what is the board doing? You know what I mean? Does he report to a board? I mean, is this an issue from that perspective? Are they going to investigate? I mean, transparency is not optional, right? So that's something the board has to look into. Other leaders are watching. Let's be cautionary. Your private choices shape your public legacy, whether you like it or not. I saw this as a press secretary. We saw this as reporters.
Exactly.
I mean, what you do in your when you are a public person and at any level, he may not be a household name, but he has a public image, right? Your private life does affect you. I mean, I remember my dad even saying to my sisters and I, what you do in public is a reflection of our family. How you behave is a reflection of me and your mom. Behave accordingly. You know what I mean? That's for everybody. And as Catholics, we're supposed to go out there and be like Christ, and I don't know their religion at all, but we're looking at this from the lens of a Catholic. And so there are a lot of issues here from a professional standpoint, as well as a moral standpoint,
What would you advise what would you advise if you were representing this company as a coach? I mean, this is first of all, it's a nightmare PR situation. What would you advise them, do you think?
Well, I mean, I definitely think this is something that the board, you have to go to the board because you're dealing with the two top people who are involved, the CEO and the HR person, right? Normally, if this is, employees, you go to the CEO, you go to the next person in leadership, the HR person. Well, those are the two people involved. So now what do? You have to go to the board and you have to discuss this from a board's perspective and say, what is the company policy? I don't know what the company's policy at Astronomer is on these issues. You have to address it. Neither of them have come out publicly yet, and I know that's a PR issue. But you're going to have there's going to be some morale fallout with this. I mean, especially when she just posted recently on her LinkedIn, patting herself on the back for her promotion. Basically, I don't have the article right in front of me, T, but she talks about this she posts on LinkedIn, which they talk about her promotion as the HR director, kind of patting herself on the back, touting her integrity. You know what I mean? Wow. So I don't know what goes on internally at the company, but there can be some major fallout on that issue, especially if people feel like there has been unjust treatment or unfair treatment. You know what I mean?
That the rules are okay for them, but not for her.
Yes,
and the CEO.
Exactly. So I don't know, obviously, the dynamics of the company itself, any issues that have happened in the past. I don't really know, but this can be an issue.
Well, this is going to be an interesting story to follow up. And again, this goes back to what we always say here. This is why we have morals. Sin is never singular. The fallout is always huge, and we always have to be sticking closely to Jesus as possible because we're all subject to sin. V, great discussion. Look forward to your show later today, Epiphany on Ave Maria Radio. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a beautiful Friday. It is July 18th, 2025. I just love the work of Word on Fire Ministry and the amazing Bishop Robert Barron. He's just an awesome communicator. And by the way, speaking of communicating, Word on Fire is Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m. Easterns on EWTN. The one, the only Bishop Barron illustrates the truth, beauty, and goodness of Catholicism. So you don't want to miss that. You also don't want to miss the interview with our friend, Dr. Matthew Petrusek, of course, who works with Bishop Barron at Word on Fire. Lucky him and lucky us that we get to talk to him today. Your podcasts are great. You guys do so much great stuff. I mean, what I love about it, and we're kind of talking about this in the last segment, Matthew, with my friend Vanessa, who's a business coach, and she's also a Catholic radio and speaker as well. But we were talking about how everything has a Catholic angle because God created the world, and so we can't. It's when you have that view, that Catholic worldview that Bishop Barron always talks about, you can connect the dots, and I think that's why what you do is so important because you help us do that. So in one of your recent podcasts, you're talking about, and this is a huge topic, how to strengthen Catholic identity in Catholic schools, which seems kind of like the Department of Redundancy department, because why do you need... Right? Well, wait a minute. We're Catholic. What do we have to identify or re-identify? So how did you come upon this topic? First of all, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be with you. It's an issue. It's an issue, unfortunately. It should be redundant. It should be a a podcast that we don't have to do.
Right.
But as many as your listeners know, and we have our own experience in a previous part of our life. Our Catholic schools, and this especially includes diocesan schools throughout the West, especially the United States, don't live up to their name, and so we want to be honest and recognize the problem and find constructive ways to address it.
All right, so you have a number of different issues that you cover in this, in terms of how the schools are not, as you just mentioned, they may be Catholic but in name only. Where do you think this started, and what does a bishop have to say about that in terms of how do we get to this point today, do you think?
Well, part of it is sort of the general decline of the church in the last, say, 60, 70 years. Now, I think I don't want to start on a negative note. I think we're seeing great signs of renewal. But it is a fact that the church has been bleeding members, and part of that has been a loss of vocation. So, as I'm sure you remember, Teresa, most Catholic schools used to have a religious who were doing most of the teaching. And that in of itself helped to create and bolster the identity. And so that's just not the case anymore. So as part of the general loss of religiosity, our Catholic schools have suffered because of that. So there's sort of a historical or sociological reason. I would also say that there's what we could say a theological or anti-theological reason as well. Unfortunately, many of our Catholic schools are not led well by people who, either because of omission or commission, are not teaching the faith, or are teaching the faith incompletely, or sometimes teaching things contrary to the faith. So we're also shooting ourselves in the foot unnecessarily. It's not just part of the general decline.
Well, that's one of the reasons that the Cardinal Newman Society got started, because they saw exactly what you and the bishop are talking about in this episode, which, by the way, is posted on wordonfire.org just a few days ago, that it is not just where we're not having only not religious people teaching, nuns or priests teaching the classes, so there's not that presence there any longer, but when at certain universities, for example, there's a mission. They still call themselves Catholic, but they're anything but in their teaching, to the point where they're promoting abortion, to where they are all about transgenderism, how they rewrite scripture. I did an interview with them. I have a segment with the Cardinal Newman Society on every Tuesday. We call it Newman News. And there's a story of a young girl from Loyola University who was a convert and was so excited about going into a quote-unquote Catholic university. And she ends up having to defend the faith everywhere she goes. Now she's working for Catholic Answers. She graduated, and now she's apologist. So it was good training for her. But at the same time, how sad that she's so excited about the faith, and she goes in and she's hearing the most bizarre things, completely opposite of what the church teaches. I mean, we just have gone so far.
We really have. We really have. And so on the one hand, thank God for the Cardinal Newman Society. On the other hand, isn't it sad that we need the Cardinal Newman Society? And they really do provide an amazing service. And then when you look at the list of schools on there, they're all fantastic schools, but then you compare it to the actual number of Catholic universities and Catholic colleges, and it's a fraction of what we actually already have institutionally. Along the same line, so I used to teach for 10 years at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and there's many good people there, and I certainly don't want to denigrate the institution as a whole, but it is the case that the last sort of year I was there before I joined Word on Fire, the university allowed, with the president's knowledge, a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood on
for
campus
crying out loud
in the same academic building that I used to be in, St. Bellarmine Hall, just beneath my office, a couple floors down. So, I mean, these things are not. It's not just they're teaching sort of slightly different versions of theology within sort of the realm of different ways of understanding Christology or ecclesiology. I mean, in many cases, they're outright anti-evangelical, teaching things that are contrary not only to the Catholic faith writ large, but also specifically to the natural law. So, yeah, it's a big problem.
Talking with Dr. Matthew Petrusek, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute, and he's a professor in Catholic ethics there as well, wordonfire.org. A recent podcast with His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron and Dr. Petrusek on Catholic schools and Catholic identity. How do we strengthen that? So we have about 60 seconds before we get to the break, but what we're going to talk about next is how do we really strengthen the identity? Give us like a little tease of what we can do before we dive into this after the break, Doctor.
Sure. So a few things that won't be surprising, but good policies, good personnel, so having the right staff in place, especially the right kinds of teachers, and good parent involvement, ongoing parent involvement. Those three things are absolutely necessary in order to reclaim our schools and to ensure that we're actually giving our young people what they deserve as children of God.
And speaking of parents, I would say that if you have a child, and I had an instance where I was speaking many years ago at a men's conference, and a man came up to me, and his daughter was at a particular quote-unquote Catholic college, doing the air quotes now, and he was devastated because he said he spent all this money on raising her Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and she seemed to embrace the faith. After one semester at this, again, so-called Catholic college, she was pro-abortion, she was pro-so-called same-sex marriage, she was all about transgenderism, and she basically was poo-pooing everything he taught. And I said, well, you're still paying for her education there? And he said, yes. And I said, why? I said, you're responsible to help her get to heaven as a parent. And he had this look of shock on my face. And I was shocked that after he's coming up to me and telling me such a personal story and a tragedy with his daughter who's obviously lost her way, that he hadn't even thought of removing her from the school.
Yeah, let's not subsidize the institutions that are harming our children. That's point number one. It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you have to take that kind of responsibility. I'm not going to support this, and this is ruining. You may not agree with it, or if she wants to continue that school, then she can pay for it. That's what I would say if it were my kid, but, I don't know. It's just so frustrating to me what's happening and how some people don't want to address it. But we'll talk more with Dr. Matthew Petrusek about how we strengthen the identity, the Catholic identity more specifically, of, yes, our Catholic schools. We'll be right back on a Friday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, Friday morning. Appreciate the great work of our friends at the Word on Fire Institute. Dr. Matthew Petrusek is a senior director of the Word on Fire, and of course you're familiar with it because of the amazing Bishop Robert Barron. I just think the world of him. He's such a great communicator. I bumped into him, Matthew, in Rome during the conclave. He was coming down from a Newsmax interview, and I was going up the stairs. I'm like, Your Excellency, remember me? I met you, blah, blah, blah. He was so nice. I was like an idiot because I'm just like a huge fan. I just love his work. I love his clarity. He's such a great communicator. He was so gracious. Hello, Teresa. How are you, dear? He was very nice. Anyhow, he's very sincere. I really love him. Okay.
He really is.
So we were talking before the break. I told you the story of a dear man, a father who was very troubled by his daughter losing her faith within a semester at a particular quote-unquote Catholic college, and then seemingly responding to me in a very shocked manner when I suggested that he might want to sit down and talk to his wife and his daughter about no longer paying for, 40, 50, 60 grand a year at this university because of what it's doing, obviously, to her soul. Do parents need to be encouraged that it's okay to do something which may seem drastic, but the more drastic thing to me, Matthew, would be to leave a child in that atmosphere where they are obviously being formed totally incorrectly?
Yeah, that point's really important to emphasize, Teresa, is that the institutions that are letting down our children, it's not some abstract harm they're doing to them. They're doing a very concrete harm.
Right.
And that's undermining the foundations for their faith and giving them the sense that policies and practices that the church sees justifiably as immoral are not only to be tolerated but to be celebrated and advanced. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing great damage to their conscience and to their moral formation. And to put it in the broadest possible terms, on their capacity for sanctification and the ability to join our Lord someday in eternal life. So the stakes really are, in a sense, the highest they can possibly be. So yes, parents from And I'm starting even in, if you're sending your children to a Catholic school and it's just kindergarten, get to know the teachers, get to know the administration, spend time in the classroom, look at the books that are in the classroom, pay attention. Are pronouns permitted in staff communications? Are there pride paraphernalia anywhere in the classroom, including on teachers' desks? Are good materials being used to teach the faith? And is there a cohesive sense of religion throughout every single one of the disciplines, and not just in ghettoized and quote unquote religion class? First and foremost, parents are responsible for making sure that all of those things are in place.
Amen. We're talking with Dr. Matthew Petrusek from Word on Fire about a really powerful recent podcast. And you could see their podcast, by the way, at wordonfire.org. This is podcast number 498, How to Strengthen Catholic Identity in Catholic Schools, posted earlier this week, July 14th. So when you address, and you have an outline here of what you covered in the podcast, what makes a Catholic school Catholic is one of the questions that you asked. And what was the bishop's response?
Well, the bishop's response is sort of at the deepest level. A Catholic school is one that in which Christ, in the form of Logos, and Christ in the form of our Redeemer, is a part of every dimension of the education. Again, it's not just a part of religion class that you check off and say, okay, now we've covered this topic. Let's go on to cover these completely unrelated topics, like math or ELA. It has to permeate the entire program, or the entire educational program. And that starts from kindergarten all the way through college and beyond, even in graduate school. That's what makes education Catholic. What also makes education Catholic is the endpoint of evangelization. Bishop Barron has said repeatedly, if our schools, our Catholic schools, and this includes Baptist schools and colleges, are not evangelizing, and he emphasizes this, he says, shut them down, close them down. They don't have a purpose. We're not here to replicate what the secular world is doing, just with sort of a Catholic flavor or sort of Catholic outer veneer. We are here to evangelize the world and to form our students. And we can do so in a way that's entirely academically sound. In fact, it'll be the best academic education that our students can possibly get, because it's grounded in the truth of all truth. Mm-hmm. And so at the identification level, it's pretty easy to define what a Catholic education is. Where things really start breaking down is the implementation of it. We start getting lots of excuses. So, I can't do this, I can't do that. We have these budgetary concerns. And so that's where we really start to see things fall apart, is when we're trying to put it into practice.
Well, one of the points that you make, several points actually, in this powerful podcast, are what really sets real Catholic schools apart. And one of the points I think is huge, and we see this, and we are so blessed here in southeastern Michigan, is we have the amazing Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, and their Spiritus Sanctus schools are just incredible. But what is present in their schools? Well, adoration during school hours, mass attendance during school. I mean, this is very serious, where the kids are going to mass daily. Adoration is a big part. And then the parents, so many parents that we know, by sending their children to their schools, because they get a very well-rounded education. In addition, they learn about the culture, they learn about the virtues. But the parents end up getting recatechized when their kids are in schools like this.
That's right. Yeah. So we have, as a church, we have all these initiatives. How do we evangelize the world? How can we, reclaim our place within the culture as a church, be a force for good, a visible force for good, as a force for Jesus Christ? And meanwhile, we have all of these institutions that are operating right now that we, in many cases, unfortunately, sort of see as a separate sort of something that has not to do with evangelization. That's just sort of schooling the kids. Evangelization and its future is only going to be really successful in the sense that we relocate it back into our Catholic schools, like in the example that you just gave. Sanctify those schools. And we don't, it's not a secret. We see them bearing fruits. We see the schools that are doing that having wait lists because they can't accommodate all the students that are there. So it's really a matter of will more than reason, and trying to figure out what we need to do.
Now, here's an interesting topic that came up in the podcast: a Catholic approach to teaching math. I never thought of that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's grounded in this idea. Think of the beginning of the Gospel of John, right? That in the beginning was the Word,
And the Word was God.
Jesus Christ incarnate is the Word. But of course, he's the eternal Word at the same time. There's we spent a lifetime unpacking what that means.
Right.
But one of the implications of that is that everything that is true is an instantiation of the reality of our Lord and Savior Jesus
Amen.
Christ. So, one of the sort of just in terms of psychologically, one of the first encounters that young people have with objective truth, with the truth that you cannot not know, with the truth that it's incontrovertible. You can't even think the opposite of it, is in mathematics. And so making that connection for students at an early age, you are learning something that is true, that's grounded in reality as such, grounded in immaterial reality. Think about it. Think of all the dimensions of math that actually don't have an analog in stuff, in matter. They're sheer sort of ideas, but they're real. That can form a foundation for opening an entire category of who God is and how the universe is constructed by these divine patterns and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that's one example of many. But yes, math should be taught through the lens of religion.
It just makes so much sense. And one of the biggest things I love about Bishop Barron and his teaching with the Word on Fire and just everything he does is that he's always bringing us back to where does all this come from? Right. It's not really that complicated when you start looking at everything through the lenses, as my late friend Al Crest used to always say, lenses of Scripture and the teachings of the Catholic Church. Everything goes back to, as you said, that first word in the Gospel of John. Everything came from God. So everything is going to go back from God. Science, nature, nothing is going to contradict him. And we have to be able to teach that to help kids connect the dots. And I always try to do that with different stories in the news. Like I was just talking in the previous break about this big, huge story, that scandal that broke at this concert on Wednesday night. I don't know if you heard about it, but with the CEO was hanging out with apparently his girlfriend, and he's married to someone else. Right. She's divorced, and she's the head of HR. And they got caught on camera at a concert, and it just exploded on the internet. And so many questions have been raised about this. Ethical questions in the business world, the human resource world, obviously marriage, adultery, what this does. Why? Why are people so upset about this? Why are people talking about it? Because in our, I don't want to get too theological, but in the deepest sense, we realize this isn't right. And where does that come from? And this is what we need to get back to when teaching in our Catholic schools.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. The natural law is the natural law. It's been, I think, buried under lots of destructive crust of secular culture, but it's still there, and we are made in the image and likeness of God. So we can't completely eclipse the presence of the natural law in our hearts. We can bury it, but we can't destroy it. And so I think you're absolutely right. There are instances in the culture that sort of break through all of that secular crust and hit our heart and say, and it awakens it. Something bad is happening here. So our job in Catholic schools is to take those seeds of those indestructible seeds, and they truly are indestructible seeds of the natural law, of the logos that really constitutes each one of us as a human being, and to give it what it needs to flourish, to become fully alive in Christ, both Christ as logos and Christ as Redeemer. We know how to do this. It is not a mystery. It's a question of getting the right people in the right position who have a love of Christ, who are teaching every single one of these disciplines. And unfortunately, we oftentimes see within Catholic institutions a sort of misplaced, let's say, empathy, where we say, well, we have all these teachers who aren't Catholic. They're good people, and I don't deny that for a second. But
they're teaching at a Catholic school.
Exactly. And when there's Mass and the young people, our precious children are watching who's going to communion, and they see their own teachers are not going to communion, how in the world do we think we're going to communicate that it's the real presence, right? If these authority figures are not doing it. So again, not to denigrate people who are not Catholic. It's a recognition that Catholic schools have to be Catholic, not only in its curriculum, not only in their policies, but also in their people.
Well, there's so many great points that you brought out in the podcast. So I just want to encourage people to go to wordonfire.org and check this out, how to strengthen Catholic identity in Catholic schools. One last question. We have about 2 minutes left, Dr. Matthew. When do you reform and when do you close a school? That came up in your discussion.
Yeah, and Bishop Barron, as he always says, answered right on. He says it's prudential. which is that's not a waving off of the question. It's a recognition that it becomes highly dependent on the individual circumstances of particular institutions. What that also means, however, is that there may be some cases, and I would say, let me just be bold, there are some cases right now of institutions that have been so corrupted and are full of people who have no interest in propagating the Catholic faith. In fact, they might even have an interest in trying to harm the Catholic faith in our own Catholic institutions. That it's time for us as the body of Christ to pull out and to put our resources into something new. Now, a wrinkle to that is our diocesan schools, right? Our diocesan schools are part of our diocese. I think all of our diocesan schools are worth saving. Our parishes need to claim them as their own, and the flip side is that is our Catholic schools need to be present in our parishes. So we need to reestablish that sort of that symbiotic relationship between a parish and its school. And that's going to take leadership, especially from the priests of those parishes.
Well, I think it's a great podcast to listen to. Anyone who has kids in Catholic school or wants to send their kids to Catholic school or a Catholic college, what a great discussion. Matthew, always great to catch up with you. Please give the bishop our best. We so appreciate his ministry and yours. Dr. Matthew Petrusek, Senior Director of the amazing Word on Fire Institute. Great resource. Check it out, wordonfire.org. We'll be right back to let you know what's coming up next week. It's Friday already. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection every day here at EWTN. Coming up on a Monday, always fun to talk with Matt Swaim from, of course, Journey Home. And he's a producer and also very involved in the Coming Home Network. And he gives us highlights from the Journey Home programs, which air on Monday nights on EWTN. And then we're going to talk about the changes in public policy regarding the abortion increases overseas. So we'll take a look at that with our friend Michael New from National Review. He's also a professor down in D.C. who does a lot of research in terms of pro-life issues. Then, of course, we will have Gail Buckley-Behringer regarding the Bible verse of the week. And we'll also have T's 2 cents and so much more. Wishing you a beautiful weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection, a production of EWTN. Can you believe we are in the third week of July already, weekend of July? I can't believe it. 4th of July, long gone behind us. But you know what? Every day is a gift, and summer is my favorite time of year. By the way, don't forget to check out on my Facebook page the information. I'm getting a lot of emails on the wonderful pilgrimage that we're doing with Dr. Matthew Bunson next fall, next October in 2026. We are doing In the Footprints of the Pope. So excited. We'll cover Rome, Arezzo, Viterbo, Castel Gandolfo, Orvieto, and more. And you can join us. Check it out, travellilyexpert.com or teresatomio.com. Talk to you Monday. Ciao, ciao.